Those who are concerned about my mental well-being from last week can now rest easy, for here we have the Diamond Select version of the Enterprise NCC-1701-E, the Sovereign class, as it actually appeared in the film, rather than the ideas that were floating around at one point that Playmates then produced their toy from. This actually flows from 2012, so they had zero problems in terms of design choice when they chose to make this. Sorry, I'm rather lurgied. The interesting thing about this, to my mind, is that they made it a long time after their first crack at the Enterprise E. I'm going to show you another one in this video, which was produced in 2005, and they went a slightly different way with it. So they came back to it again, and this is a sort of as I understand it, because I don't have the box for this one unfortunately, but I believe that this is the Enterprise E as we see it in First Contact, which is why I mentioned the Playmates version, because it doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that actually got added to the Enterprise E in Nemesis. So we don't see it on screen, but between Insurrection and Nemesis, apparently the Enterprise E got a refit, and it had more photon torpedo launchers added, it had its wing pylons tweaked, it had more phaser strips, and it was generally, refit, but not actually renamed in any way. So as a result, the ship does look a bit different, I think, as compared to the First Contact version, which is this one. Now, as much as it pains me to do so, I will demonstrate the differences using the Playmates version. Now, as you can see, size-wise, there's not a lot in it actually. Both ships are about the same size when you actually look at them like this, but as you can immediately see, the nacelles are radically different. So these, false fingernails that I was talking about last week are gone, and here we have the central bridge down the centre of the Buzzard collectors to actually protect them, and that's spot on as it should be in the movie. We've also got this coloration here, which is better. We've also not got this ridiculous single impulse engine. I say it's ridiculous. This is obviously what they were told they were going to have. It was going to have at the time, so it wasn't really their fault. But in the end, what we got was two impulse engines separately. So it's actually quite an interesting design choice, because I imagine it would mean that if you wanted to go left or right, or port or starboard perhaps more appropriately, then you could favour one impulse engine over the other and actually achieve your turn that way, which might be better, I don't know. But in any event, you can see why I was so irked last time, because it's just not, they just don't hold a torch to one another. One thing I will say about the Diamond Select version though, it's slightly curious in the sense that they've chosen to put the manufacturing details actually sort of on the underside of the nacelles. So you've got the 2012 date there, copyright CBS, and then you've got this sort of big blurb about Diamond Select being the manufacturers on the other nacelle. So that's kind of odd choice. I don't think they've ever done that before. But you can see on the underside, the degree of detail there is considerably improved over the Playmates version. Now, interesting, stand-wise, I don't have the stand for this one, but it looks like it would take the ball joint sort of stand that Diamond used from time to time directly, rather than being a sort of a straight peg. So I'm not a fan of those ball ones. They're a little bit scary in terms of being sort of breaky. One thing I still haven't done actually is to go and look to see if anyone does any alternative stands for them. But it would be nice to see if there were some alternative stands, because as I say, between that and the Constitution class stands, they are often breaky, and I have broken one myself. Not loads, fortunately, but obviously, they're not easy to come by unless you're buying a complete ship. So let me kill the lights and just run you quickly through the sound effects on this one. Bearing in mind this is 2012, so it's going to be interesting to see what the range is. I haven't actually run through all of these. But as is usual with Diamond Select, what we've got here is the single button push up the top here. I'm just going to turn it around because I'm aware that when it does go, it does light up quite a lot.
Ready phasers and quantum torpedoes. Fire all weapons. All hands, flappers phasers. Engage. Ready phasers and quantum torpedoes. Fire all weapons. All hands, flappers phasers. Engage.
I have to say, I do really like the lights on this. It's they've even lit up sort of the internal decks here slightly. So I think that's a lot more lighting than I've seen previously, possibly on any of the Diamond Select ones actually, but of course this is quite late in the day for it. So I mean, I think that's a really, it's not loads and loads of effects, I'd have to say that, I think, but nonetheless, it's a really, because it's so light, it's quite easy to actually just sort of pop it up and whiz it about, So as a sort of a kid's toy, unusually for Diamond, perhaps in a sense, you can actually whiz this around quite happily, and it's big. It's a good 1.5 feet long. It's quite thin, but that's okay. I'm all right with that. That is exactly as it should be. So I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever, because this is the thing with it being a sort of a cinema screen kind of enterprise. That's the sort of the way in which they read the dimensions for this one. So got no issue with that at all. And it just looks really sleek. It's nice and bright. It looks fresh. So I'm now really interested to have a look at the other one and get it out of the box and just see whether or not that approach differed when they did it the first time round. Because, as I say, to my mind, it's still odd that this is the 2012 release and not the 2005 one, because I would have thought they'd have started with this. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is intended to cover Nemesis as well, but they just went a different way with the way in which they've coloured this one. But I'm pretty sure I've seen it mentioned as being a First Contact version, and you'll see when I show you this next one that the distinction between the two of them is very, very apparent. So they are very, very clearly different releases. Before I forget, another thing I should mention about that first Sovereign is that it takes AAAs, but one of them has to go sort of right underneath the other two AAAs. So whatever you do not put AAAs in without using the black material band on the bottom of it, because that's probably about the only thing that's going to allow you to extract stuff once you put it in the battery compartment. So just a little tip. So here we have my boxed version of the Sovereign from 2005, apparently. So that's 10 years after, I think it's 10 years after First Contact came out, and about 3 years after Nemesis came out. So I know this is Nemesis because when you look at the side of it here, it mentions as seen in Star Trek movies, First Contact, Star Trek Insurrection and Star Trek Nemesis. So clearly this was done after that. Another interesting thing about this is it's mentioning Art Asylum quite evidently on here. This I haven't seen for a while, but of course thinking about it, this is not long after Diamond got the license. And at that point they were still double-headering it with Art Asylum on the packaging, whereas ironically, had I had the box for the 2012 one, they probably wouldn't have mentioned Art Asylum. So we've kind of come back full circle here. So you can see there as well, they've got a few sort of First Contact shots there as well, I think it probably was. But you might have already noticed, if I bring it back around to the front of the box, that they've taken a very different slant with this one, because you can immediately see there's a lot more colour on the top of the saucer section as compared with this one. This is where having them side by side really helps. Whoops. So if you happen to see these on an auction, for example, you will immediately be able to see the difference between what I think is the First Contact version, which is from 2012, and this one, because this 2012 version is much cleaner in terms of not having all this kind of noise going on the dorsal surface there. But that noise is probably not unreasonable, given that this is supposed to be the Nemesis version of the Enterprise E, which, as I mentioned earlier, should have had a refit by this stage, which added, I think, more armour and so on, as well as more offensive capability. So let's just have on the front it just says authentic Star Trek sound effects, light up engines, bridge and deflector. I'll be interested to see if it's actually radically different to the one we've just looked at. It says try me, press bridge dome, features Captain Picard and battle commands. So it may not be radically different, there may just be re-releases of one another. So on the back here, we have art direction, manage Jesus, administration, so I think these are the various, this is the asylum inmates. Administration, Digger, Bonasoldano, Adam Unger, Robert Yee. Sculpture, Patrick Piggott, Peter Kelly. Control art, Nelson Asensio, Uriel Casson. Paint department, Elizabeth Beleminski, I think, Beleminski. Package design, Manny Jesus and Geordie Djokovic from the looks of it. The seventh ship to carry the name Enterprise. That's interesting. That's really interesting. A lot of the videos I watched on YouTube before I started looking at this said the sixth ship. But actually, when you include the NX, it is the seventh. So interesting detail, because they were all about the Enterprise era, don't forget. This was post-Enterprise era. So this Sovereign class starship is built directly from scans of the CGI filming model. Okay. So U.S.S. Enterprise NCC-1701-E, Star Trek Starship Legends range, 18-inch. Let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise. Captain Jean-Luc Picard. We've got featuring warp out and warp pass by. Warp engines light up and pulse. Photon attack, full torpedo spread. Sound from Star Trek Nemesis. Authentic Star Trek sound effects, light up engines, bridge and deflector. Captain Jean-Luc Picard, engage, fire all weapons, all hands battle stations. That sounds very familiar. Phaser attack, all phasers charge and fire with multiple enemy shield impacts. Enemy attack. Warp power loss with damage sound and light effects. Star Trek Next Generation 7-inch action figures various, also available all the way down the right hand side there. Okay, so without further ado, let's get this one out, power it up, and let's see what it's like. Now, as I have previously mentioned, I'm not a massive fan of these ball joint stands that this one comes with, but I do like the fact that whereas this is a stand for the Galaxy class, notice the combat shape, yeah? The combat shape for this stand is in keeping with the later movies where the com badges had been updated, so that's a nice touch. So they definitely get points for that one for me, but I'm still wary of these ball joint only stands. I mean, yes, they do work, but you can just hear that creaking and I'm like, no. Yeah, so useful for these purposes. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. This is not the same Enterprise that you saw in the previous box. This is actually another one that I had, because I remembered actually when I was looking at it that one of the ones that I had didn't run through the sounds properly. So there's a switch inside the battery compartment that switches between test and play mode. So sorry, a try me and play mode. And in play mode, it didn't produce any sound. But oddly, in try me mode, if I held the button down, it would actually cycle through all of its sound effects, which was kind of weird. But this one is working fine with a play mode. So I'm going to go through it as it would normally work on this one. And we'll just see how we get on with it, basically. This is actually its original testing batteries, I think, and its original batteries are still in. So we'll see how this one goes.
Engage. Ready phasers and quantum torpedoes. Fire all weapons. All hands. Battle station. Engage.
Just trying to zoom in on the back here a little bit for you, because there is a little bit of light coming from... Yeah, the impulse engines and this little bit here, which I think is a shuttle bay, are making a little bit of light.
Ready phasers and quantum torpedoes.
So I don't think that's radically different to the first Sovereign that we looked at. I think that is largely the same set of sound effects, actually. So I guess the 2012 version didn't have any new material to go with, because, you know, we'd heard it all, literally, by that point. So no particular difference there. But as you can see with this one, obviously the detailing is radically different. So let's have a look at the two alongside each other, and it's probably easiest if I just pop the camera up for you to have a look at them next to each other, because, as I say, it is radically different approach to life, but for no apparent reason, in a sense, because they are basically the same ship. But as you can see, the detailing is much darker on the boxed version. So on the earlier version, they've gone way more detailed. Now, it did say it was based on the CGI model. So if it was based on the last iteration of the CGI model, then I guess logically it was incorporating all of these sort of Nemesis changes into the Sovereign's design. So that is why they are, you know, somewhat different. But it's just odd to me that they would release a first contact version after having done this one. So why would you sort of almost go backwards? I can only assume that they felt there was going to be a demand for the Nemesis version and the first contact version, because there'd been tweaks. So you can see here that the top surface has definitely been changed. That is not the same as it is here, where they've got more escape pod hatches, for example. So they've definitely done a few tweaks. Now, I have seen them do this before. They have done this before with things like the NX Excelsior and then the commissioned Excelsior, where effectively they've released exactly the same model, but with slightly different registries, and they've just tweaked tiny little things between the two versions I can only assume because they're trying to maximise what they get out of the license, in effect. Because without having lots of different new ship designs, their best option was probably to reuse a mould they already had, but tweak it a little bit and then rebadge it. And we've also seen, of course, that the boxes get reused with stickers on top of them to delineate the difference between the two different models. So I think that's what we're seeing here, is that we get little tweaks. Because like, you know, here, see the nacelle covering, the Buzzard collector coverings here, slightly different, I think, between the two different versions. It's really, really subtle little changes. But they are there. Yeah, the end of the nacelles is slightly different. Well, that might be the way I'm looking at them, but I think something I read said that the actual nacelle pylons were different. So the sort of holding struts were different. It's very hard to tell visually though. But yeah, just little tiny tweaks. I'm just sort of looking at them from a different angle myself now, just trying to see. Well, the funny thing is the 2005 version doesn't have that text I showed you underneath the nacelles. So that's an improvement. That's quite funny. But yeah, the nacelles are, the Buzzard collectors are slightly different, I think. Not massively, but slightly. Yeah, it's funny. It's just like, you know, sort of the first contact version is just kind of cleaner, basically. The one thing I did notice in particular, actually, and I think this must be the same across both of them, because neither of the versions had lights inside the nacelle strips here. So you might remember that on the first contact version, there was a nice blue light inside here when the nacelles were going to warp and so on. That isn't present on the 2005 version. And I think the 2005 version is a little heavier. So I think that the electronics in the 2005 version are not obviously as good as the electronics inside the 2012 version. So actually the 2012 version is better lit than the 2005 version. Sounds probably about the same, but I bet this has got LEDs in and this has got bulbs in, and that's why it feels a bit heavier. Pure guesswork on my part. I don't particularly want to take them apart, but if I were to guess, that is what I would probably guess at. So that's it for those, I think. Shame I haven't got the other box for this Starship Legends one, but just can't find it. I think there's maybe one example. It's a plain blue box. The purple box is actually quite dynamic, but then of course I'm forgetting that that's an Art Asylum designed box, and the Art Asylum boxes were always a bit more exciting than the Diamond Select Pure boxes, which were just kind of blue or some sort of uniform colour. So that's probably an Art Asylum distinction, I think. But anyway, they're both good ships, but I think the first contact one is probably a lot less busy. I think maybe they went too far doing the Nemesis version. They could have actually toned it down a bit, but then it doesn't have text on the bottom of the nacelle, so there is that. But shame the electronics on the other one didn't quite work, although they were definitely there. They were just a bit sort of hidden. Maybe someone could fix that. It might just be a loose contact somewhere inside. It's quite possible. But it's a nice looking ship. It's a nice evolution of the Enterprise. It really is. And you know, as I say, it's not my favourite stand type from Diamond, but if you're careful, you'll be alright with it. So on that bombshell, I think I will leave you there for now while my voice just about keeps going. Cheers for now.